My dad called me a disgrace for not being like my golden brother. Now they're desperate to reconnect after my success went public. I'm a 35-year-old male who owns a custom furniture business in Denver. Sounds like I've got my shit together, right? Well, my family had literally no freaking clue until a few months ago. This is going to be a long one, so buckle up. Growing up in our middle-class suburb, our household operated on one unwritten rule. My brother, Larry, 38 years old, could do no wrong, and I could do no right. Larry, 3 years older, had perfect grades, was captain of every sports team, and was treated like God's gift to humanity. Meanwhile, I was the family disappointment, breathing valuable oxygen that could have gone to Larry. I once overheard my dad on the phone with some neighbor, talking about me like I was a mailroom intern. Yeah, Alex works at Boeing. He's doing something entry-level with wings or rivets or whatever. I was designing structural systems for defense aircraft, but sure, rivets or whatever. The comparisons started early as hell. When I was 6, I built this fort that my dad called structurally unsound before straight up kicking it apart to show me how it's done. That same week Larry stacked some Legos, and my parents acted like he designed the freaking Space Needle, not even exaggerating. My 8th birthday is when I first realized where I stood in the family hierarchy. Larry had a baseball game that day, so my parents rescheduled my birthday party without telling me. I found out when I came home, excited for cake and presents, only to discover an empty house because everyone was at Larry's game. My cousin's mom dropped me off, looking confused why no one was home. I sat on the porch for 2 hours in the Denver drizzle, getting soaked and wondering if I'd gotten the date wrong. When they finally got back, my mom just said, "We'll celebrate tomorrow." They never did. I got my presents a week later, unwrapped, in a Target bag. Not even kidding. For my 16th birthday, I got driving lessons with the cheapest instructor in town. This old dude named Earl who smelled like cigarettes and kept falling asleep during my practice hours. Dude almost got us killed when he dozed off, and I nearly drove into oncoming traffic. When I told my parents, they accused me of exaggerating. Meanwhile, Larry got a used Audi for his 16th. He needs it for college visits, Dad explained, while I pretended not to care. I spent the next year bumming rides or taking 3 buses to get anywhere, while Larry cruised around with his friends. High school graduation really hammered it home. Larry's graduation photos covered our living room wall in expensive frames. Mine sat in a $5 Walmart frame on a bookshelf behind a potted plant. When Larry got into Stanford, my dad bought him a BMW and threw a party with all their country club friends. When I got into Washington State on a partial scholarship, which wasn't easy by the way, I got a good job text message while they were on vacation in Maui, a trip I wasn't invited on because there wasn't enough room in the condo. Found out later they had a 3-bedroom place. By the time I turned 25, I'd fallen in line with their expectations. I had a decent engineering job making $95,000 at Boeing, not spectacular but solid enough that they could mention it without grimacing. Meanwhile, Larry was pulling $250,000 at Goldman Sachs, plus bonuses that probably exceeded my annual salary. Every family gathering was the Larry show. Larry just closed another deal, or Larry's buying a vacation home in Aspen. I nodded and smiled through it all, drinking too much at family dinners, while relatives asked if I was still at that airplane company, like it was a summer job at Dairy Queen. Larry would helpfully mention engineering positions at his company that I might qualify for if he put in a good word. As if I needed his charity. Then something unexpected happened. I discovered woodworking. It started as a weekend escape from cubicle hell. My apartment maintenance guy caught me trying to fix a broken chair and showed me his workshop in the building's basement. Dude was a former carpenter who got tired of Denver winters on construction sites. He let me use his tools if I helped with building repairs. Turns out, I had a knack for it. There was something honest about turning raw timber into something functional. No office politics, no quarterly reviews, just wood, tools, and results you could actually touch. Soon I was making coffee tables that friends fought over. One buddy's wife literally slipped me $300 cash at a party and whispered, "Don't tell him I paid this much." That was the first time I felt like I was actually good at something. My 2 college friends, Raj and Mitch, kept pushing me to take it more seriously. Raj handled marketing for REI and knew what people would pay for artisanal anything in Denver. Dude was always saying, "You realize people are paying $4,000 for tables that aren't half as good as yours, right?" Mitch ran his dad's construction company and had connections with interior designers who charged stupid money for curated spaces or whatever the hell they called it. The breaking point came at Christmas 2018. Larry had just made junior partner or some shit. During dinner, he spent 20 minutes explaining his bonus structure to my visibly aroused parents. When he finally shut up about his 7-figure package, my dad turned to me and said, "Well, Alex probably got a nice Christmas ham from Boeing, right, son?" Everyone laughed like it was the funniest joke ever. My mom patted my hand and said, "There's nothing wrong with job security, honey," as if I was some kind of charity case. I quit Boeing the next day. Of course, I didn't tell my family. As far as they knew, I was still designing airplane parts like a good little engineer. Meanwhile, I started apprenticing with an old Finnish craftsman named Frank, who ran a furniture workshop in Reno. The pay was ass, $16 an hour, but the knowledge was priceless. Frank had built pieces for Bill Gates's house in the 90s. Dude was a legend who looked at IKEA furniture like it was made of cardboard and spit. Frank had this assistant, Victor, an ex-military guy who'd served 3 tours in Afghanistan before finding woodworking as a way to deal with his PTSD. Victor was built like a brick house, covered in tattoos, and had hands so steady he could carve details finer than a CNC machine. Dude rarely spoke, but when he did, everyone shut up and listened. First day I met him, he looked at my hands and just said, "Soft engineer hands won't last a week." That was my introduction. Victor was the only guy Frank trusted with his best tools. He slept in the workshop some nights when his PTSD got bad, and I'd sometimes arrive in the morning to find him already working, having been there since 3 in the morning. While Frank taught me the traditional techniques, Victor showed me the real shit. How to work when you're exhausted, how to push through the pain when your hands are bleeding, how to meet impossible deadlines without sacrificing quality. The guy was a machine. I learned everything: selecting lumber, traditional joinery, working with exotic woods, dealing with clients who have more money than taste. Frank called me the engineer and regularly told me my first 50 pieces would be garbage. After that, maybe you make something worth sitting on. He wasn't one for participation trophies. My first month was pure torture. Victor would wake me at 5 in the morning with a bucket of ice water if I was even a minute late. My soft engineer hands blistered, bled, then blistered again, until they finally hardened. I sliced my thumb open, trying to use a Japanese pull saw. Victor stitched it up right there in the shop using fishing line, and wouldn't let me take a day off. "Wood doesn't care about your feelings," he'd say, while I tried not to pass out. Frank just watched, occasionally grunting in approval when I didn't complain. The worst day was when I spent 70 hours building my first real commission, a writing desk for some tech exec's wife. I was so proud of that thing. Frank took one look at it, pointed out 12 different flaws I hadn't even noticed, then made me disassemble the entire piece and start over. I almost quit that day. Victor saw me packing up and just said, "So that's it? One setback and you're done? No wonder you'll never be better than your brother." I have no freaking clue how he knew about Larry. I never mentioned my family to these guys, but it worked. I stayed and rebuilt that desk twice more before Frank finally nodded and said, "This one doesn't embarrass my shop." Frank was right about my early work, technically solid but soulless. I approached furniture like engineering problems, structurally sound but boring as hell. Then something clicked. I started creating pieces that told stories. A dining table with a river of blue epoxy running through reclaimed wood from century-old Denver buildings. Desks incorporating steel from the old Breckenridge brewery. I mixed metal with wood, combining the precision of my engineering background with the warmth of natural materials. I spent nights and weekends at Frank's shop, soaking up knowledge and developing my own style. My hands got calloused, my back ached constantly. But for the first time, I was creating something I was genuinely proud of. Even Victor started treating me with something resembling respect, occasionally nodding at my work instead of just pointing out its flaws. Coming from him, that was basically a standing ovation. 6 months in, disaster struck. My cousin Tina spotted me hauling lumber at a supplier in Highlands on a Tuesday when I should have been at Boeing. She didn't even say hi, just snapped a pic from her Tesla and texted it to my mom with, "Guess Alex lost his engineering job. Saw him working at a lumber yard today, LOL." My phone blew up within the hour. My dad's text was just 4 words, "Home now. We talk." Walking into my parents' McMansion that night felt like entering a trial where I was already guilty. Mom, Dad, Larry, and his wife Heather sat in the living room with their emergency family meeting faces. Dad in his dentist money armchair, Mom perched on the sofa edge like she might need to flee, Larry manspreading on the leather couch with Heather's hands strategically placed on his knee. Before I even sat down, Dad tossed his phone at me like he was throwing scraps to a dog. The screen showed my cousin's message and picture. Explain. I tried telling them about my furniture business, how I was learning from a master craftsman, and my plans to open my own studio. I even pulled up photos of pieces I'd made that had sold for real money. Larry laughed, a full-throated laugh, like I just told him I was training to be a professional unicorn rider. You're throwing away a stable engineering career to become a handyman? Jesus Christ, Alex. Heather adjusted her tennis bracelet and chimed in with her fake concern voice. It's such a physical job, too. What happens when you hurt your back or something? Not everyone can coast into management like in the corporate world. Mom finally looked up, but not at my work photos. She stared past me at the wall of family photos, all featuring Larry's accomplishments. What will I tell Diane and Susan at the club? They just asked how you were doing at Boeing last week. Dad stood up, straightened his golf shirt over his country club gut, and delivered the line I'll never forget. No son of mine quits engineering to become a damn hobby carpenter. This is disgraceful. Fix this mistake and get your job back, or don't bother coming home for Christmas. Larry smirked and added, maybe I can make some calls if you've burned bridges at Boeing. And that was it. Something snapped inside me, not in a dramatic movie way, but in that quiet moment when you finally see things clearly. These people weren't my support system, they were my judges. You know what, I'm good, I said, standing up. Keep your Christmas. Don't be dramatic, Mom sighed. I'm not being dramatic. I'm just done trying to meet standards that keep changing. Larry's standards, your standards, everyone's standards but mine. This isn't about Larry, Dad said. It's always been about Larry, I replied. And that's fine. He's your star, but I'm done being the planet orbiting him. I walked out. No slammed door, no dramatic exit, just a quiet click of the door and the strange lightness of a weight finally set down, after carrying it too long. With my family in the rear view, I went all in on the only thing that had ever felt right. When Frank was retiring, and had no kids interested in taking over his business, I told him I wanted to buy his workshop. He laughed like I told a good joke. With what money, engineer? But he saw something in me. Maybe the same stubbornness he had at my age. He offered to sell me his tools and client list for payments over 5 years. No banks, no collateral beyond a handshake. That's the kind of dude Frank was, old school to the core. Victor shocked everyone by asking if he could stay on if I took over. Apparently the gruff hard-ass had decided I wasn't completely useless. You need someone who knows what the hell they're doing, he said, which was as close to a compliment as I'd ever get from him. Frank seemed surprised but nodded like he approved of Victor's decision. I convinced Raj and Mitch to join me. Raj was tired of marketing overpriced camping gear to tech bros who'd never sleep outdoors. Mitch was sick of building cookie-cutter homes for his dad's development company. We pulled our savings, $95,000 from me, my entire Boeing 401k plus savings, $60,000 from Raj, and $80,000 from Mitch. We took out another $150,000 business loan with my condo as collateral and kept Frank's location in Reno. I won't mention the real name, so let's call it Grain and Timber. When we signed the final papers, Frank handed me a small wooden box he'd made. Inside was a set of his personal carving tools that had belonged to his father. Don't screw this up, was all he said. Victor stood in the corner, arms crossed, and just gave me a single nod. Coming from these two, this was basically like being knighted. Those first 2 years nearly broke me, physically, mentally, financially, all of it. 18-hour days bent over a workbench. I lived on ramen, coffee, and ibuprofen. My hands cracked and bled during Denver's dry winters. I showered at the workshop most nights because I was too tired to drive home. One night, I even sliced my hand open on a bandsaw because I was too exhausted to focus. We couldn't afford employees, so Raj handled marketing while stocking shelves at REI nights. Mitch managed clients while still working part-time for his dad. I built until my back felt permanently curved over a workbench. The shop became my life. I'd wake up at 5 in the morning, work until 11 at night, crash on the cot in the back room, and do it all again the next day. The first year was brutal. I nearly gave up at least once a month. We'd get commissions that barely covered materials. I'd spend 80 hours on a table that sold for what amounted to about $8 an hour for my time. My electricity got shut off at my apartment because I forgot to pay the bill for 3 months. I was barely there anyway. Victor let me crash on his couch for a week, which consisted of him waking me at 4 in the morning, throwing cold water on me, and telling me to stop feeling sorry for myself. Tough love, but it worked. I started to wonder if my family was right. Maybe I was just a delusional failure. I actually called Boeing HR to see if my old job was still available. The day after that pathetic moment of weakness, we got our first big break. Slowly, we found our niche, not selling to super rich assholes but to people who understood quality, tech workers who'd grown up with craftsman grandfathers, old Denver families who appreciated local wood, young professionals buying their forever dining table with their first real bonus. Our big break came from this writer named Samantha, who wrote for design magazines and had a massive Instagram following. Not one of those fake influencers, but someone with actual credentials and taste. She wandered into our workshop looking for a custom desk for her Denver apartment. I remember being annoyed at the interruption because I was trying to finish a commission on deadline. Victor, surprisingly, was the one who took time to show her around while I kept working. She watched me for an hour, just silently observing while I fitted joinery on a credenza. Finally she said, "You're not marketing yourselves right. You're not selling furniture, you're selling stories." She traced her finger along a piece of elm I was working with. "Where's this from?" Turned out, it was from a 120-year-old tree that fell during a windstorm at City Park. I knew the whole history, because I'd personally salvaged the wood. She made me tell her every detail about every piece in the shop, where the wood came from, what the building was before demolition, who might have touched these materials in their previous life. 2 weeks later, she published a 4-page spread about us in 5280 magazine. She wrote about how each piece carried the DNA of Denver's history. The photos she took made our dusty workshop look like some kind of mystical craftsmanship temple. We specialized in pieces with stories. Tables made from Douglas fir salvaged from demolished century-old Denver buildings. Desks incorporating steel from the old Breckenridge Brewery. Headboards built with wood from trees that fell during historic storms. Each piece came with a history card explaining its materials, something Samantha suggested that became our signature. Word spread like wildfire. Her article got picked up by design blogs. Some tech influencer bought one of our river tables and posted it, tagging us. I turned down most of the rush orders and prima donna clients. I wasn't interested in becoming a luxury brand. Samantha became a regular visitor to the shop, bringing designers and editors by. She never asked for a commission or kickback, she just genuinely believed in what we were doing. By year 3, we had a 6-month wait list and hired 2 apprentices. Young guys from a local trade school who reminded me of myself, eager to learn but needing a chance. We opened a small showroom in Highlands where people could see and touch our work. By year 5, we had 8 employees and had taken over the space next door to our original workshop. Throughout it all, I still sent my parents $5,000 every Christmas, not because they needed it, Dad's dental practice did just fine, but because I was still their son, whether they acknowledged it or not. The checks were always cashed within days. They never called. I heard about Larry through extended family and social media. His Goldman career took him to New York, then briefly to London, before he landed back in Denver as a vice president in their office. Each move was announced through mass family emails, like royal proclamations. Meanwhile, I built a stable business that grossed $3.2 million annually, with healthy profits, all in complete silence. 5 years after walking out of my parents' house, grain and timber had grown into something real. We had our main workshop, a showroom in Reno, a second location in Boulder, and 18 employees, including 4 apprentices we'd trained from scratch. I'd bought a small craftsman house in Berkeley, nothing fancy, but within biking distance to the shop and completely paid for. I dated occasionally but mostly poured myself into the business. Some nights, I wondered if my family ever thought about me, but it was rare. I was too busy to worry about that. Then the 2022 recession hit. The tech sector took a nosedive. Amazon froze hiring. Microsoft started layoffs, and suddenly Denver's housing market wobbled. People who'd been living on stock options and home equity lines of credit found themselves overextended. I found out through my cousin that Larry's bank had started strategic workforce reductions. He'd been right-sized during the third round, corporate speak for getting your ass fired. According to family gossip, his severance was decent but wouldn't last long with their mortgage, private school for their kids, and the vacation property. While Larry was panic updating his LinkedIn, my business actually stabilized during the downturn. We weren't selling to speculators or house flippers. Our clients were people who'd saved for quality pieces they'd keep for decades. We maintained our 6-month waitlist by adjusting prices slightly and offering payment plans. Victor proved his worth during this period. He'd been through economic downturns before and knew how to operate lean. He figured out how to reduce our material waste by nearly 30% without compromising quality. The guy could look at a pile of offcuts most people would throw away and visualize exactly how to turn them into sellable products. He started teaching our apprentices how to make these smaller items during downtime. We even started a more affordable line of smaller pieces, cutting boards, wall shelves, and small side tables, that kept cash flowing and our apprentices busy during slower periods. I refused to lay off a single employee. Instead, I cut my own salary and worked alongside everyone else to keep things moving. Samantha came through again, writing a feature about recession-proof craftsmanship that highlighted how we were adapting instead of downsizing. She included a photo of Victor teaching 2 apprentices how to turn trash wood into treasure. The guy hated having his picture taken, but suffered through it for the good of the business. After that article, our smaller items started selling faster than we could make them, creating a sustainable cash flow that helped us weather the worst of the economic storm. My cousin mentioned that Larry had been forced to sell their vacation home and pull their kids from private school. Heather had to get a real estate license to try bringing in some income, while Larry consulted, was unemployed but couldn't admit it. Apparently they'd been living on credit for years, maintaining an image they couldn't actually afford. Classic Larry, all show, no substance. Still, not once did I hear directly from my family, not a text, not an email, not a, "Hey, you still alive?" While I was hearing all about their financial struggles through extended family, they couldn't be bothered to check if I was surviving the same economy. According to my aunt, they told people I'd gone to find myself or was working with his hands somewhere whenever someone asked about me at their club. I sent one final Christmas check in December 2022, with a note, "Last one. Hope it helps." It was cashed the next day, no acknowledgement, no thanks, no nothing. That was when something finally clicked for me. I realized I'd been hanging on to this idea that eventually they'd see me as worthy, that success would finally make me visible to them. But the truth was simpler and harder. They just didn't care. Not about my success or failure. I simply wasn't important enough to factor into their worldview. So, I stopped caring too. I deleted my fake Facebook account where I occasionally checked their profiles. I told the extended family I wasn't interested in updates. I focused entirely on my business, my small circle of genuine friends, and the community of craftspeople I'd become part of. I started mentoring at-risk teens through a local program, teaching basic woodworking skills. Most of these kids had never built anything with their hands before. Watching them create something tangible, seeing that pride when they finished a simple shelf or box, reminded me why I fell in love with this craft in the first place. Surprisingly, Victor joined me in this effort. Turns out, the guy had been working with veterans struggling with PTSD for years, teaching them woodworking as therapy. He never talked about it, classic Victor, but he was amazing with the troubled teens, especially the really angry ones. He'd spot the kid in the corner, the one ready to blow up or walk out, and somehow know exactly what to say. "You think you're tough? Try making this joint perfect with those shaky hands." He'd challenge them, never coddle them. And they responded to his brutal honesty. 3 of our current apprentices came from that program. I dated a kindergarten teacher named Ellie for almost a year. She was cool, smart, funny, independent. She wanted to move in together, maybe start thinking about kids, but I couldn't do it. Couldn't risk letting someone that close. The one time she asked about my family and why they never called, I completely shut down. She deserved better than my emotional baggage. We broke up amicably, and I went back to my workshop and my solitary life. Victor, who never commented on personal stuff, just looked at me after Ellie left for the last time and said, Running from ghosts doesn't make them disappear. Then he went back to sanding, like he hadn't just dropped the most profound shit ever. Then came the day that changed everything. I was in our Rhino showroom, sketching design options with a couple who'd saved for 3 years to commission their forever dining table. They were celebrating 10 years of marriage and wanted something built from local woods that would eventually go to their kids. This was my favorite kind of project. People who understood the value of quality and story, not just buying expensive to impress their friends. I was deep into discussing wood grain patterns when our front desk manager, Emma's voice cut through my concentration. "Sir," as I explained, "we don't do rush orders. Our current wait time is 7 months minimum." I looked up to see Emma, normally unflappable, clearly stressed, and standing across from her. My entire goddamn family. Dad was red-faced, leaning over the desk like he did with dental assistants who questioned his methods. Mom stood with her arms crossed. That pursed lip look she gets when service people don't bend to her will. Larry and Heather hung back with their 2 kids, looking impatient and entitled as always. I froze. 5 years of radio silence, and here they were, invading the one place I'd built for myself. I should have walked away, should have let Emma handle it, but something pulled me toward them. Not hope or love, just a morbid curiosity about what the hell they were doing here. "Is there a problem?" I asked, approaching the group. They didn't recognize me at first. 5 years of physical work had changed my formerly soft engineer physique. I'd bulked up from hauling lumber and standing at workbenches all day. The flannel and raw denim work clothes were a far cry from the Brooks brothers they remembered. My beard and calloused hands completed the transformation. Dad spoke first, not even looking at me directly. "Yes, there's a problem. We need a dining table for an important dinner party next month. And your girl here says it takes 7 months. That's ridiculous. We're willing to pay extra." Before I could respond, the showroom door opened, and in walked Connor, the Seahawks quarterback who'd become a friend and client. He spotted me and called out, "Alex, just the man I wanted to see." Everyone turned. Connor walked over with that easy confidence of pro athletes. "Dude, that media console you built us is unreal. Sarah's posted it on Instagram like 20 times. Her followers are going nuts over it." He shook my hand with genuine warmth. I'd built pieces for his home last year, nothing flashy, just honest work he appreciated. "Everyone keeps asking who made it. You're about to get slammed with calls from the whole team." Larry's mouth literally fell open. My father's face went from condescending to confused in seconds. Connor glanced at my family, sensing the tension. "Sorry to interrupt. These clients?" "No," I said simply. "Just some walk-ins with unrealistic expectations." Connor laughed and clapped my shoulder. "Their loss. Call me about that custom dog bed we talked about. Brutus deserves the best." He headed out, high-fiving one of my apprentices who was staining a tabletop near the door. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with one of my Japanese chisels. My mother recognized me first, her hand going to her throat, that theatrical gesture she does when she's shocked. "Alex, is that you?" Dad's eyes narrowed, trying to process what was happening. Larry just stared, his face a mix of confusion and something else, maybe envy. For once in his life he wasn't the center of attention. Victor emerged from the back workshop, carrying a massive slab of walnut for another project. He immediately assessed the situation, his eyes narrowing as he looked from me to my family and back. He said nothing but positioned himself near the counter, arms crossed over his chest like some kind of bearded, tattooed sentinel. The message was clear, he had my back if this went south. "Emma," I said calmly, "please show the Millers the maple options we discussed. I'll be with you in a moment." I turned to my family. "I'm afraid we can't help you." As Emma explained, "Our wait list is 7 months, no exceptions." "Alex," my mother started, her voice doing that fake emotional wobble, "we had no idea that I was successful." I finished for her. Or that I existed at all. "It's been 5 years, not one call, not one text, just cash checks." "Son," my father tried, somehow finding a way to sound both authoritative and desperate at the same time, "we should talk about this privately." "There's nothing to talk about," I replied. "And this is private. This is my business, my life. You're not part of it." Heather stepped forward, always the social operator. "Alex, we're family. Families fight, they make up. The kids would love to know their uncle." I looked at her 2 children, who were absorbed in their iPads, completely oblivious to the family drama unfolding. I'd never even met them. According to their monogrammed backpacks, their names were Aiden and Madison, my own nephew and niece, and they wouldn't recognize me if they passed me on the street. "We need this table," Larry finally said, his voice lacking its usual confidence. "It's for a dinner with potential investors. I'm starting my own firm, and impressions matter." I almost laughed. Of course that's why they were here. Not to reconnect, not to apologize, because they needed something. Larry's new firm was probably just him desperately trying to salvage his career after getting axed, and naturally, a fancy table would solve everything. "We're willing to pay whatever it costs," my father added, as if that would change everything. Money, the solution to all problems in his world. "You don't get it," I said, looking at each of them. "I don't want your money, and I don't make exceptions. Not even for family, especially not for family." "But," my mother started. "Kate," I called our operations manager, who was watching from across the showroom. "Please show these folks out, and add their names to the permanent ban list." "Wait," my father said, his voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Can we at least talk about this? Maybe you could come for dinner this weekend." I looked at each of them. For the first time in years, my father looked older and frailer than I remembered, my mother with new lines around her eyes, Larry with the desperate look of someone watching their life unravel. For a split second, I felt a twinge of something, not quite pity, not quite nostalgia. "No," I said finally. "I don't think I will." I turned my back on them for the second time in my life and walked toward my office, calling over my shoulder, "Kate, if they're not gone in 2 minutes, call security." I didn't look back to see if they left. Didn't need to. That night, I was alone in my workshop after everyone had gone home. I ran my hands over a slab of 200-year-old redwood I'd been saving for something special. Then I heard the back door open. It was Victor. He rarely stayed this late. Without a word, he pulled up a stool and sat across from me. For a few minutes we just sat in silence, him studying my face while I traced the grain of the redwood. "Those people, that was your family?" he asked. I nodded. He reached into his pocket and tossed something onto the workbench, a bronze coin worn smooth around the edges. 10 years sober," he said. "Got it 2 weeks before you started here." I looked up, surprised. He'd never shared anything personal before. "My family gave up on me after my 3rd relapse," he continued. "Can't blame them. I was a mess after Afghanistan. But here's the thing, I didn't get sober for them, did it for me. Same reason you built all this, for you." He stood up, clearly uncomfortable with saying so many words at once. "Just figured you should know. Walking away from them again was the right call." With that, he turned and headed for the door, pausing only to add, "I'm taking tomorrow off. First time in 3 years. Don't burn the place down while I'm gone." That was probably the most Victor had ever said to me at one time, and damn if it wasn't exactly what I needed to hear. I thought about my family showing up like that, the desperate look on their faces. For years I'd fantasized about a moment like this, them seeing me successful, them needing me for once. I thought it would feel like victory. Instead, it just felt empty. What was the point of proving yourself to people who never really saw you in the first place? Samantha stopped by the shop yesterday. She's engaged now to some architect. They want us to do all the furniture for their new place. She brought me a gift, a small wood carving from Japan. "For the man who has everything except family," she said. I must have looked surprised because she added, "Victor talks more than you think." "So, what would you do if you were me? Take them back, help them out, or keep walking?" I still don't know the answer. Maybe there isn't one perfect answer. Maybe it's okay to just keep building and see what happens. Victor would probably just say, "Stop overthinking and get back to work, princess." And he'd be right. Edit 1. Thanks for all the kind words, strangers. For those asking, yes, of course I changed names and specific details for privacy, but the story is 100% real. Edit 2. To answer the most common questions. 1. No, I haven't officially reconciled with my family yet. 2. Yes. Victor would probably murder me for sharing these stories. 3. The business is still going strong, 25 employees now, and we've got a 9-month wait list.